Hey everybody, this is Benji Bruce with Speaking Lifestyle, and in this video we are going to talk about signs for predicting an event's budget. How much moolah do they got?
How'd you do that?
I see that success is not something you pursue, it is something you are.
All right, so for the longest time, I've always wondered, how do you predict an event's budget? So they come to you, they say, hey, we want to hire you. And you're thinking, I want to get the most amount of money as possible. I want to make, if I can get 100 grand from this event, I want 100 grand. And so you're thinking, well, how do I get the most amount of money as possible? How do I predict how much money they have? Now you can ask for their budget. And that's what you're thinking. Maybe I'll just ask for their budget. But sales 101, this is sales 101. Everybody lies. People lie to you as a salesperson. And just because you're a speaker, it doesn't mean they don't see you as a salesperson. So they're going to lie to you. When you say, what is your budget? I guarantee you they will not tell you their budget. And what I mean by that is even if you get a number, if they say, oh, our budget's 10 grand, I guarantee you their budget was actually 15 grand. I guarantee you 100%. And so basically, you don't want to ask for their budget, and it's also because even if they say, oh, our budget's 10 grand, and you say, oh, well, my fee is 10 grand. Well, now you look pretty sleazy. Now you look like that sleazy car salesman. So basically what you're doing is whatever their budget is, you have to come in below that. Otherwise, you look like a sleazeball. And so you just don't want to ask for their budget. So how do you figure out what their budget is? So here are some things that I use in order to predict the budget for an event. So number one is how far out do they contact me? So if they contact me 2 months in advance, I know that their budget's going to be like 2 grand. I mean, the closer you are to an event, the smaller the budget is. If they contact you a year in advance, you know, okay, they got a big budget. Because, I mean, they've done this before, and this is probably like, this is also the biggest factor in terms of how they see you. So it's also not about what they can afford. So maybe, let's say they contact you 2 months in advance, right? It indicates to you that they basically think you're a scrub. Because think about it like this. No one would ever contact Tony Robbins 2 months in advance to do their event. They would think like, damn, I hope he's available 2 years in advance for our event. That's pretty much how they think of Tony Robbins. And so it's an indicator in terms of how they see you. And so the way they see you is also an indicator of how much they're willing to pay you. And so the further out they contact you, like a year in advance, 8 months in advance, the further out they contact you, the more they think, okay, this person is probably going to be booked up if we contact him too late. So let's hurry up and contact him in advance, meaning that their view of you is up here, okay? So this is a big indicator in terms of how much they're willing to pay, like how much their budget is in terms of paying you, right? And so that's a big indicator. And then you want to think if they want you or if they just want a speaker. There's a big difference. People who want you specifically, they say, we want Benji Bruce. Those people are willing to pay way more than someone who says, we want a speaker. We want a motivational speaker. And so people who want a motivational speaker, they will never go above what their budget is inside of their head. People who want you, they'll say like, man, whatever it takes to get this dude, let's just get him. And so there's a huge difference. That's what I pay attention to. Like further out they contact me, do they want me versus another speaker versus a speaker? Another thing is the more people at the event, the bigger their budget. So, and this isn't, by the way, these aren't like hardcore indicators like, oh, if they contact me a year in advance, they definitely want to pay me 30 grand. It's not like hardcore indicators. These are just signs of here's what their budget is, okay? So here's another thing. They say basically the more people at the event, the bigger the budget, because it just makes sense. The bigger the event, the more they have to spend. And so they're just used to spending a lot of money. So the bigger the event, the bigger the budget. Then you want to think, okay, who did they hire before? This is why I always ask, like, who did you guys hire last year? Like, and by the way, I reword that. So I used to say, who did you hire? Now I say, what's the name of the person you hired? Because people always, they would go around it. They would be like, oh, we hired some motivational speaker. Now I say, what's the name of the person you hired? Because I want the name so I can Google them. If they hired Tony Robbins last year, I'm like, all right, they can afford 50 grand. So basically I asked, like, who did you hire last year? Because this just tells me what they're used to paying. If they're used to paying the guy last year 30 grand and you're 25 grand, it's the same thing to them. So who did you hire last year? Then I think, is it an annual employee event? So do they do this every year, and is it an employee event? If it's a seminar, I think like, God damn it, these guys they're cheapos. So if it's an annual employee event, I know that every year with the annual employee events, they want to do bigger, better. They want to just take it up a notch every single year. And so they focus on the experience. It's not an expense to them. It's an investment. By paying for a speaker, it's an investment. So if it's an annual employee event, I say, okay, they want bigger, better, and everything. So they're willing to spend more money every single year. Just the bigger, the better. And then the experience. So they're in that state of mind. And so here's the thing. These are just indicators in terms of how much money they're willing to spend, and in terms of where do they see you as well, like when they contact you far in advance versus like, oh, our event's next week. So these are indicators in terms of what their budget could be, and these gives you signs of predicting in terms of, okay, I can say 20 grand versus 2 grand. So it gives you a sign. What you want to do is you got to focus on things like this to create a lead score. That way you have all this information and you can easily quote 20 grand or however much you want to quote. So you use this information for a lead score, and that's basically how you predict an event's budget. You'll never really get exactly on. You'll never be like, oh, if all these 5 things are filled out, that means they have a $20,000 budget. That's not what this does. What it does is it says, okay, all these things are here. They probably have a big budget, meaning they can afford 20 grand. So I'm willing to quote 20 grand versus $2,000. So that's what it does. It gives you an indicator. These are signs for predicting the budget. That's how you do it, like a boss.